All right, so today I'm going to cover what I consider to be the 4 pillars of fitness. And when I say this, I'm going to preface this saying that I don't believe fitness is health. I believe that these things are part of being healthy, especially when done appropriately and in moderation. But any of these things, if taken to the extreme, if you're an extreme bodybuilder, if you build an extreme amount of muscle in your body, if you are an extreme endurance athlete, these things ultimately will take a toll on your health. So I'm not speaking to the extremes of these. I'm speaking to the average person, myself, the normal person that just wants to live a healthy, productive life, be in shape, take care of their bodies, do the right things for them. These are the pillars that, if we support them all equally and understand even just enough that these things are here, this is how we can train better for, like I said, I think the most durable, longest health span that we can. So what are they? I've got them into 4 things here. The first one is stability. So as I sit down here, if I was to do a squat on this box, am I able to stay stable, have a good frame with my feet, with my torso, with my core, all of that? Is that all able to stay in the right position so I can move freely, safely, and really ultimately efficiently? The second one is strength. So again, how much load, how much force can I apply to move a load over a given space? These two really combine together. You have to have stability in order to, if you're going to do any type of free weight movement, any type of athletic movement, you have to have that stability in order to use your strength. Otherwise, it's like a leak in a pipe. You could be incredibly strong, but as you go to bend down and squat, and if anything is moving around, it's leakage. You have lost the ability to use all the force, or to create all the force that you're capable of. The third one and fourth one are kind of at opposite ends of the spectrums, but they're aerobic training and anaerobic training. One being like a jog, easy, where you can still have a conversation, and the other being at the other extreme where you're going all out, max intensity, for much shorter durations of time. So let's dive into them one by one here. So the first one is stability, and I'll try to keep this simple. There's lots of different ways you can think about this, but if I was an athlete and I had to perform a specific type of movement pattern for that sport, I need to be stable. I need to be able to pivot. I need to be able to transfer energy and force through space. And if I'm throwing a punch, for example, we all hear that this comes from the hips. So as you throw a punch, I'm going to throw a hook. It's coming from the hips. So I have to be able to create a nice stable base with most of my body and be able to take all this power from down here as I transfer up and ultimately throughout my fist. Like that is coming from here. So if I'm not stable, if I'm not able to create a stable frame for that force to move through, then by the time the energy is coming out of the punch, I've lost most of it. It's not going to be strong. It's the same as applying to lifting weights. If I was going to deadlift, this is probably 30 pounds. So I could be pretty unstable given my body, and I could still hinge and pick this up. So from another angle here, I'm going to bend down, and if I had a heavy load, if I had what would be a maximum load for me, I need to make sure that my body, my frame that I've created, is as sturdy as possible. So in order for me to do that, I have to set up. I have a couple different things I do. I'm at a hip hinge. I've got my feet tensioned in. I'm going to pull my shoulders back, and then I'm going to drive through the floor as I come up. But if I have any extra movement in that process, then that means, like I said, I have leakage, and my ability to create maximal force is going to go out through any of those places that there's leakage. And that's also how we can get hurt too. So it's, a lot of people worry about hurting themselves with these different types of, especially some of the bigger compound or Olympic lifts. And it's sure, anything's possible, but learning to create that stable frame that's where I start everyone at as we go through training, is to see what do their movement patterns look like? What does the quality of the movement look like? Before we add load to, let's say, a squat. If I was going to squat and work with somebody, I would want to make sure that they're nice and stable with no weight before I added weight. And if they can do that, all right, we'll add some weight, see what it looks like. Can I still keep that frame? And as they progress, we can add more and more weight, but I know that they've got the stability to do so, and we're not moving around. So that's probably one of the most common things I see with people is, even if they've done a lot of things like lunges or squats, how stable, how much control do they actually have over what their body's doing? So you could insert that word control. Can you move smoothly through space? And that's a good indication of how stable you are. And as you add more and more load or resistance to that stability, it will show itself very quickly, whether it's there or not. The second pillar we go back to is strength. And strength comes in a lot of different ways, but ultimately it's the ability to move load. And if I, like I said, I was just here squatting. Okay, I've got this bag, it's 30 pounds. I'm working on building the muscles and on my quads, my glutes. I'm using my core to stabilize. But these really is primarily working the front of the legs, the back of the legs, the glutes, some big major muscle groups. And as I continue to add load to that, I continue to increase the load to that, and doing more and more volume, more and more reps, that is going to ultimately increase my strength. Something that, we all think about muscles and how big the muscles might be, and that's a sign of strength. But you can also think of strength as a skill. And there's lots of sports, lots of athletes where getting bulkier is actually going to make them at a disadvantage. So take a rock climber. They're incredibly strong in so many ways. It's almost freakish. But if they were to strength train, which probably would help them in certain ways, they're not going for larger muscles, but they're going for true strength to be able to move their body in the ways that they need to. And a cyclist, same thing. They don't want to weigh any more than they need to, because they have to carry that weight with them around all the time. But they still need to strength train for what they're doing. So there's also thinking of, if there's anything to think about strength, it's not just about having big, bulky muscles. That's actually pretty hard to do. And if you just go out and start strength training, if that's a fear you have, that you're going to just, start to look like Popeye or one of these bodybuilders, you can probably cross that idea out, because it's not easy to happen. It's not easy to do, and it's probably not going to happen on its own. But you can still become very strong, which if we think about, what in life would you not be better served by being stronger? And especially as we get older, there is nothing I can think of why I would not want to be stronger versus being weaker. It's never going to hurt. So strength is a skill. There's lots of ways you can train it. But if you think about it from that standpoint, it's not just about muscle anymore. Powerlifters, for example, look very different than bodybuilders. Bodybuilders have, they're kind of for the muscles for the show, and although they're strong, they're nowhere near as strong as a powerlifter. So if you just think of those two as kind of two opposite ends of the spectrum, that kind of paints the picture that I'm trying to talk here. But then again, take that as kind of the fringes, and then bring it back to us, normal life, normal people. How can we train strength as a skill? How can we get stronger, just so we can be better for anything that we do? The third and fourth one, I'm going to talk about these together because they really go hand in hand, but they're different, and that's what I want you to understand. So we have aerobic fitness, and we also have anaerobic fitness. And so I described that these two are one is low intensity. So if you took any type of cardio activity, typical cardio that you might think of, jogging, swimming, rowing, biking, it's where you can perform that activity at a moderate to low intensity, and that you could theoretically just continue doing for hours and hours and hours on end. On the other side of that, we have your high intensity. So if you're going to go out and run a mile for time, if you were going to go out and do a 10K or a 5K for time as a race, you're going to be in that 80, 90, maybe even 95% of your maximum heart rate. And that's really what we're talking about here. So zone 2 is at 60 to maybe 70% of your maximum heart rate. And you can use, if you have a watch or some type of heart rate monitor, you can find it that way. There's a calculation. You can take 220, subtract your age from it. So if you're 40 years old, you can estimate that your maximum heart rate is 180. From there, you can take 50%, all right, that's 90, 60%, and you can start to figure out what this range is for you, considering your age, and that's where you want to be for zone 2, is at 60 to 70%. On the other end, we want to really get to the upper limits of what we can do. And this is going to be for a lot shorter duration. So you might do an hour or 45-minute zone 2 workout, great. But if you're going to be in that upper zone 4, zone 5, you really only need about 12 minutes a week of actually being in that zone. So that still might take 45 or 50 minutes to do a workout. And it could look something like you could do 1 minute on, 3 minutes off. That's 1 minute of work and 4 minutes total. You do that 12 times. So you have 12 minutes of work, but it took you 48 minutes. And you had a lot of rest in between. So that's like a 1-to-3 rest ratio. And that gives your body enough chance to rest and recover, most of the way. And then you go back at that intense activity again. There's lots of different variations of drills you can do around this. But the idea that I want you to take away, not so much as how to do it right now, is just to understand that we need to train both ends. And they're very different, and they should feel very different. And they're probably both going to feel wrong. One, you're going to feel like I'm not doing enough. The other one, you're going to feel like, oh my God, this is intense. And that's really what you want to do, is train both of those and stay away from as much as possible this kind of gray middle area, which I know when I first started running about 7 or 8 years ago, most of my runs were actually in that middle zone. And what ultimately happened is any gains I was making, they plateaued. I stopped feeling like I was getting faster. And if anything, I started to feel tired and just worn down because I was always training in this kind of middle zone. And I really wasn't training for adaptation on the lower end. So I wasn't improving my metabolic health and my ability to use fat as a fuel source. And I wasn't training nearly enough with enough rest on the upper end. So I wasn't able to, I wasn't increasing my VO2 max and that really upper threshold of doing that type of work. So what I was left with was just kind of this zone in the middle where I wasn't getting better on either of these spectrums. And that's what we really need for even if you're not training as an athlete, if you're just trying to be fit, you want your VO2 max as high as possible, and you want your metabolic health and system to be improved and be as efficient as possible. And so you have to train both of those. They're going to feel very different. And most people, they just stay in the middle. They kind of go in, do some work, get a sweat on. They're not taking appropriate amounts of rest. And they're also really not pushing themselves to that upper end. So understanding that those two, how different they are apart from each other, and knowing even what it takes to get into one or the other. One's going to take slowing down. One's going to take turning the gas, turning it up. That is going to dramatically improve your fitness. And like I said, especially that upper zone, you could do that 1 day a week where you just focus on that, again, with a lot of rest, or you could put a couple minutes in at the end of each workout, or however you want. So you can really sprinkle that in throughout the week, and you don't need to overdo it, and to get amazing benefits from that. So those are the 4 pillars of health. Again, we've got stability, which is our ability to stay and create a frame that allows us to move the maximum load that we can without losing anything, while staying safe, staying in a good, effective, efficient position. And this comes into athletic sports, but it even just comes into, if I'm going to pick something up off the ground, a bag of dog food, can I do it in a way that is safe and efficient so I can move that load? We have strength, which is how much load I can move, and then we have this kind of range I've given you for how to train our cardiovascular system, our metabolic system, and that's this zone 2 versus this upper zone 4, zone 5 threshold. So these things are incredibly important. Again, if you want protocols for how to do all this, there's tons of stuff out there. I can share some more with you if you're interested. But just having an understanding that there are differences in these things, and when you put all these together, and that's really what I thought about, is that all 4 of these together is what I consider someone to be fit. Because if you take any of them by themselves, you can be incredibly stable, but not have any real strength to move any significant load. how much is that worth? And on the other end, if you're incredibly strong, but you can't go out there and run even a quarter mile or do an activity for more than a minute or two without just being completely gassed, again, how applicable is that to life? You can be the strongest man in the world, but if you don't have any fitness in those other areas, it's I think we're missing a lot here. And the same on, a lot of people love to jog and run and ride their bike. Like, great activity. But they've shown that people that do that all their lives, they really don't have a lower chance of mortality compared to just the average sedentary person. So, because they're missing strength training. So it doesn't mean stop doing the thing you love, but if you love to run, if you love to cycle, can you get an hour, maybe could you even get 2 hours in of strength training in a week? That'd be great. But even if you can get an hour in, now you've got a much more balanced package that's going to give you, it's going to improve your performance in whatever it is you're doing. It's going to make you fitter for life. And it's really what I think is, these are the ingredients that help us to live a healthier life, to help us have a much greater health span, not just longevity, but a health span of the time that we're here. So all of these matter. You don't have to do them all at once. As I program these into my training, into my clients' training, we try to fit most of these in each week, but we also go in cycles where these things they have more emphasis for different portions of the year. So if I break the year down into 4 cycles, some cycles might be more heavily focused on strength, some might be more focused on strength endurance, some we focus more on stability, and you can do it that way too. So you don't have to try to get all of these into 1 week or 1 session at a time, but know that your overall training, you should be thinking about each of these and then finding fun ways to do it. Because we did not get into specifics, but there's tons of ways you can play with these and find something that's enjoyable, challenging, teaches you something new, and ultimately, like I said, is going to make you a lot more well-rounded. So those are the 4 pillars. If you have any questions, if you have any feedback, if there's something different that you have experienced, or as you think about this stuff, I would love to hear it. This is just my way of thinking about it from the training that I've done over the years. But if you have anything, any comments, I'd love to hear it. And as always, remember, movement's medicine. So let's keep moving, and we'll see you guys on the next one. Thank you.